sister died 6 years ago, but she still calls every night at 3:15 a.m. I know how this sounds. Another fake ghost story. Another desperate attempt for attention. But I promise you, if you were me, if you had to hear what I hear every single night, you wouldn't be so quick to call it fake. My sister Emily died in a car accident 6 years ago. She was 19, a freshman in college, full of life. Her laugh was loud, contagious. She was the kind of person who walked into a room and made it feel warmer. I was 21 at the time, her big brother. I was supposed to protect her. I failed. It happened on a Saturday night. The roads were wet from the storm earlier that day, the air thick with mist. We were coming back from a party. She was drunk, but I was sober. I was the responsible one. Until I wasn't. I wasn't speeding. I wasn't under the influence. But I made a mistake. A small, stupid mistake that lasted 4 seconds. I checked my phone. Just a glance. A quick look to see who had texted me. By the time I looked back up, the truck had already veered into our lane. The impact was instant. I remember the glass shattering, the metal bending, my head slamming into the steering wheel. I blacked out. When I woke up, everything was too quiet. The kind of quiet that lets you know something is terribly wrong. Emily wasn't moving. Her body was twisted at an impossible angle, her face covered in blood. I don't know if she died on impact or if she suffered. The paramedics said she was gone by the time they got there. I told the police I didn't remember what happened, and they believed me. Because the truck driver had been drinking. The blame fell on him. Case closed. No one ever questioned it. But Emily knew. The first call. The call started a week after the funeral. It was 3:15 a.m. when my phone rang. I was still half asleep, disoriented, but I answered anyway. "Why did you let me die?" Her voice was crystal clear. No static, no distortion. Just her. I dropped the phone. That was the first time, but not the last. The calls kept coming. Every single night. Same time. Same question. I stopped answering, but it didn't matter. She started leaving voicemails. Some were just silence. Others were breathing. Slow, wet breathing, like someone struggling to take their last breath. I changed my number, got a new phone, even moved to a different apartment. But it didn't stop. The nightmares. Then came the nightmares. At first, they were just flashes, headlights, screaming, the taste of blood. But then they got worse. I started seeing it from her perspective. I'd feel the impact, hear my own screams. I'd feel the glass slicing through my skin, the weight of the car crushing me. But the worst part, the moment before everything goes black. The moment where she realizes she's going to die. The pure terror in her eyes. Every time I wake up gasping for air. And every time the phone rings. The text message. Last night was different. I didn't wake up from a nightmare. I woke up because I couldn't breathe. It felt like someone was pressing down on my chest, squeezing the air out of my lungs. I tried to sit up, but I couldn't move. Then my phone buzzed. A text message. "Look outside." I didn't want to. I really didn't want to. But I did. And that's when I saw her. Emily, standing under the streetlight, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. Her arms hung limply at her sides, her body still dressed in the clothes she died in. Blood-soaked jeans, a ripped hoodie. Her face was a mess of torn skin, shattered bone, and rage. But she was smiling. My phone rang. 3:15 a.m. I didn't answer. I just stared. And then she took a step forward. The truth. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, watching her. But eventually, my phone buzzed again. Another text. Time's up. The lights in my apartment flickered. The TV turned on by itself, playing static at full volume. My phone screen glitched, warping her last message until the words twisted into something new. I want you to see what I saw. Then everything went black. When I woke up, I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I was sitting in my car, the night of the accident. The truck was coming. I knew it was coming. I tried to move, to scream, to do anything, but I couldn't. This time, I wasn't in the driver's seat. I was in Emily's. I watched as I glanced down at my phone as the headlights grew closer, as the impact ripped me apart from the inside out. And then, I woke up. Back in my apartment. But something is different now. My phone isn't ringing at 3:15 anymore. Because I don't need the calls. I remember everything. I remember what she saw. And I think I finally understand what she wants. I don't think this is over. Not yet. I've been living the van life for a while now, but last night some kids knocked on my window. They wanted me to let them in. I don't know how long I have. My battery's at 14% and I don't dare start the van. If I do, they'll hear me. I know that sounds paranoid, but you didn't see him. Or maybe you have. If you have, tell me. I need to know how to get out of here, okay? I travel alone. I document it. My channel isn't big yet, maybe 12,000 subscribers, but I post regularly. Off-grid campsites, van conversions, solo travel tips, that kind of thing. I stay out of cities and I stay off well-worn paths. The further I am from people, the safer I feel. Or I guess I should be saying the safer I used to feel. Tonight I'm parked off a forest road in Idaho, miles from the nearest town. It's the kind of place where if you screamed, no one would hear you. That's one of my go-to videos, by the way. A big scream, loud as I can, and then just the silence afterward. Basically, the place was perfect until the knock came. A single, soft knock. Not on the door, on the window. I froze. It was just after 1 a.m. The woods were silent, no wind, no animal noises. My van is unmarked. I never advertise I'm a woman traveling alone, and I always wait and post my videos a week after I leave the spot just to make sure no one catches on to where I'm parked. So how did someone find me, let alone creep up without setting off the motion lights? Another knock. Light. Insistent. There was no way this could be anything good, right? My heart was racing, my stomach already twisted into knots. Muscles pulled tight, I reached for my phone. My stupid fingers fumbled it and it hit the floor mat. The thump seemed thunder loud, and when I sat back up, I nearly screamed. A child's face was pressed against the window. Pale skin, dark hair, wide staring eyes. But something was wrong. The glass reflected weird, but there was no shine in the kid's pupils, just black. Completely black. I choked on my breath. Every instinct in me screamed wrong, wrong, wrong. Why was there a child out here? I was so far away from any of the main roads. It wasn't the kind of place children would be. The kid didn't move, didn't blink. Then another knock. My head snapped toward the sounds and my stomach dropped. There was a second one. A little girl this time, standing by my back doors. Same dark hair, same vacant black stare. I don't scare easy. I've slept in parking lots where guys tried breaking into my van. I've camped in places where the only sounds were coyotes circling. I'm not an adrenaline junkie, but I'm also not just starting out. But this was something else. I kept my hand low, fumbling for my knife while trying to keep my breathing steady. That sounds bad. These were just kids, right? But you don't understand. There was something wrong with them. The boy at the window finally spoke. Let us in. 3 words. No emotion, no inflection, just a flat, empty demand. I shook my head. It made all my hair stand on end. He spoke again, more persistent this time. Let us. The girl knocked again, harder. I heard it rattle the doors. It was a childish response, but I grabbed my blanket and pulled it up over my shoulders, cowering beneath the heavy cotton like it was a shield. I clutched my knife so tightly it made my knuckles ache. I don't know how long I sat there, too afraid to breathe. I knew that if I opened the door, I wouldn't be able to close it again. Suddenly, they stepped back. The dark of night engulfed the windows again. I barely had time to process that relief before a new sound nearly made me scream, a tap on the driver's side. I whipped around. There was a third child, a new one. This kid was a little taller. He was maybe 12 at the oldest, standing inches from my driver's side door. Unlike the other two, he was grinning. The handle jerked, but I kept my doors closed so it didn't open. The grin widened. Let us in. The same 3 words again. It wasn't a question, it was a demand. I don't remember grabbing my keys, but suddenly they were in my hand. I flipped the ignition. The dashboard lit up. My heart slammed. If I had to, I'd run them over. But the engine didn't start. I turned the key again. Nothing. Nothing. The battery was fine. The gas was full. It had started just fine this afternoon. But right now, the van wasn't starting. And the kids, they were still standing there, staring, smiling. I reached for my phone, fingers shaking. No service. Then the tapping started again. Every window, every door. A slow, measured rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. I must have blacked out at some point because the next thing I knew, the van was filled with light. Sunlight. I woke up still clutching my knife. My doors were locked. My keys were still in the ignition. My phone was in my lap, battery at 23%. I risked a glance outside, but there was no sign of the kids. I opened the driver's side door, heart hammering. The air smelled like damp earth, pine. A beautiful, misty morning. My tires were untouched. There were no footprints in the loamy soil. It was like they'd never been there at all. But they were. I know they were. And I know they're still out there too because my van still won't start. And I'm worried that tonight the knock will come again. I found a town that doesn't exist, and now they want me to stay forever. I never meant to find Black Hollow. It wasn't on any map, and the GPS had glitched out miles back, leaving me stranded on a winding forest road. The rain had been pouring for hours, and my car's headlights barely cut through the thick fog that clung to the trees like a shroud. I was lost, tired, and desperate for shelter when I saw the sign, a rusted, crooked thing that read, "Welcome to Black Hollow. Population 47. The town was wrong. The streets were empty, the houses dark, and the air smelled faintly of rot, like something had died and been left to fester. The only light came from a single flickering street lamp, casting long, jagged shadows across the cracked pavement. I parked my car and stepped out, my shoes squelching in the mud. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the silence was deafening. That's when I saw them. Figures began to emerge from the shadows, their movements slow and deliberate. They were dressed in tattered, old-fashioned clothes, their faces pale and gaunt. Their eyes were the worst. Hollow, empty, like they'd been scooped out and replaced with nothing but darkness. They didn't speak, just stared at me with those awful, empty eyes. "I'm sorry," I stammered, backing toward my car. "I didn't mean to intrude. I'll leave." One of them stepped forward, a tall man with a long, ragged coat. His voice was a low, guttural rasp. "You can't leave. Not now. You've seen us." I didn't wait to hear more. I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my chest. But the streets seemed to twist and shift, the houses closing in around me. No matter which way I turned, I always ended up back at the same spot, beneath that flickering street lamp. The figures were closer now, their hollow eyes fixed on me. "You belong here," the tall man said, his voice echoing in the empty streets. "You've always belonged here." I woke up in a small, dimly lit room. The walls were bare, the floor cold and damp. A single candle burned on a rickety table, casting flickering shadows across the room. My head throbbed, and my mouth tasted like copper. I tried to stand, but my legs were weak, and I collapsed back onto the floor. That's when I noticed the symbols carved into the walls, strange, twisting shapes that seemed to move in the candlelight. They made my head spin, and I had to look away. The door creaked open, and the tall man stepped inside. He was holding something, a small, black book with a symbol etched into the cover. "You've been chosen," he said, his voice low and reverent. "The Hollow has chosen you." "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Let me go." He ignored me, opening the book and beginning to read. The words were in a language I didn't understand, but they made my skin crawl. The symbols on the walls seemed to pulse in time with his chanting, and the air grew thick and heavy. I could feel something ancient and malevolent pressing down on me, suffocating me. "Stop," I screamed, covering my ears. "Please, stop." But he didn't stop. The chanting grew louder, more frantic, and the room began to spin. The candle flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. I felt hands, cold, bony hands, gripping me, pulling me down. I struggled, but they were too strong. I could feel myself being dragged into the floor, into the earth itself. And then silence. I woke up in my car, the rain still pouring outside. The town was gone, the forest stretching out in every direction. My hands were shaking, and my clothes were damp with sweat. I told myself it had been a nightmare, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and stress. But then I saw it, a small black book lying on the passenger seat. The symbol on the cover was the same as the one carved into the walls of that room. I opened it, and the pages were filled with the same strange, twisting symbols, and at the very end, written in shaky handwriting, were the words, "You can't leave. You belong to the Hollow now." I tried to throw the book away, but it always finds its way back to me. I've tried to tell myself it's just a coincidence, that I'm imagining things, but I can feel them watching me, even now. Their hollow eyes, their cold hands. They're waiting for me to return. And the worst part? I think I want to.